So now we'll take a look at the pad mode, or a closer look. We have discussed how we can access the pad mode. Simply click on the pad mode button, and whichever group we have loaded, we have the sounds we can trigger via the pads. So nice for finger drumming, auditioning sounds. However, we get some options whilst pad mode is selected. We get some options over here, choke and link. And these are great little tools for helping with your playing style. So we'll begin by looking at the choke groups. So we can use the choke groups and apply or send pads into the choke groups in order to chop one sound off with another. And it helps with just a more realistic playing style. So let's say, I'm going to turn that closed hi-hat up a little bit. So let's say we're doing some hi-hat stuff. It's all a bit messy because there's quite a lot of splash on that open hi-hat. There's quite a lot of release or tail. So let's set these up in a choke group. So with this closed hi-hat selected, I'm going to put it into choke group 1 and set it to the master. And this open hi-hat, send it into choke group 1, set it to the slave. So now that will play, and it's got all that release tail. However, when I play the closed hat, it will chop it off. More realistic to how a drummer would play with live drums. The closed hi-hat chops the open hi-hat off, and we could do the same for the crash and the rides, for example. So the crash, send it into choke group 1, slave, and we can get some really nice drumming styles that way. If we sent two sounds in, say this closed hi-hat, and we want that snare as well in the choke group, and as a master, they just chop each other off. So you could have these both as masters, and now the snare is also chopping off the other sounds that are set to slave in the choke group. And then we've got closed hi-hat and snare, and we can chop sounds off. So we can get a nice tight programming style like that. So if I was to start playing some stuff in live, you can hear the sounds, the snare and the hi-hat chopping off the open hi-hat and the crash, and we get this really nice realistic sound. So that's choke groups, and we also have link groups here. So link groups, we can tie sounds together using the link groups. So say on this kick drum, I've got that other kick drum. I could trigger them both by hitting both pads together, or I could apply them to a link group. So kick drum selected, link group 1, master. Second kick drum selected, link group 1, slave. And now with them set up in this way, I trigger pad 1, and that's the master of the link group, and it triggers both sounds. However, if I hit the slave in link group 1, it triggers on its own. We could do the same for the snare and the clap. Send that into link group 2. Snare is the master, claps the slave in link group 2. And we could even add the side stick to that link group. And you can see all three sounds are triggering there. So a really nice way to start triggering multiple sounds at the same time. So we could also apply some of the link group stuff to melodic sounds. So you could start to create stacked synth patches effectively. So if I went into my instruments and just very quickly loaded in this sound, we'll load in another sound in pad slot 2, say a bass sound. Drop it down a bit. Back to pad mode. So what I could do now with these two synth sounds is link them together. So could say the synth, this one is the master, and then that one is the slave. So that one plays on its own, and then I can trigger them both from that one pad. So you could line up 4 synth patches and trigger them all from the one pad. So it's quite a nice way of triggering sounds.